this is Amanda with Delamano Designs. Thanks for stopping by. Today we are going to do a SlimLine Flippin Awesome card. It's a Halloween card. This one was so fun to make. It's so fun to do the interactive cards and fun to give them out as well. So this first part, I apologize, I didn't show the inking for this, but I took the Flippin Awesome. It comes with a couple different sizes rectangles that you can use for it. So I chose the smaller, or I'm sorry, square, it's not a rectangle. I chose a smaller square and I masked off the bottom portion of it and inked the top with Oxide black soot, I believe. Yes, black soot ink. And then I also masked around, there's a border around it that's die cut, or not die cut, but sorry, I'm blanking on the words, but I gave it a border pretty much. And then the bottom part, once I inked up all the black, the bottom part I inked with Walnut, Oxide ink Walnut stain. So once I had that done, I lined up all my little figures from the Spooky Village from Fawn. I wanted each little, like the trick-or-treaters, to move closer and closer to the house. So I had to do, because each panel is the same, but it has the trick-or-treaters moving closer and closer. I had to cut 4 of each, 4 houses, 4 trick-or-treaters, 4 trees. And I didn't show the coloring for the main part, the trick-or-treaters, the house and the tree, but I'll have all the colors linked below. Here I decided I needed something more in the sky. So I stamped out 4 of the sun or the moon and clouds for each one, because as anything in the distance isn't going to change position. So what's in the sky, the moon and the clouds, is going to stay in the same exact spot with each panel, even though things in my foreground are going to move, but things in the distance are going to stay the same. So that's why after I get all these cut out here, I'm using my little sidekick and the coordinating dies with this Spooky Village set. Cutting all these out, I colored them, the clouds I just outlined with, I believe I either use a C1 or a C0 and then blend it out with my colorless blender. So right now I'm trying to figure out where I want each of these placed. The black panels, the black and brown panels that these trick-or-treaters are on, I did also spritz with some Sukaneko glitter spray and let that dry before I attached everything. So what I am doing is I am trimming off the house, making a little mark where it needs to be cut because of the border that's around the panel. I didn't want to glue the house onto the edge or the trick-or-treaters on with it hanging off, because if I were to cut it, it would go around that border, and that border I wanted to maintain, so I cut the images before gluing them on, so that way that border would still be intact. So I kind of had to figure out where I wanted everything, and then those clouds, because they are in the distance, they're going to stay in the same spot. I can cut each one of them the same exact spot, and I just layered them up with the one I'd cut, and I drew a little mark, and that way I knew where I needed to cut the rest of them. So I'm gluing on that first panel. The trick-or-treaters are far away, and the house is far away too. There's some distance between that trick-or-treater and the house. And I decided at this point, so I wouldn't get confused, I was going to mark each panel, because it's important to keep them in order for when you go to glue them down onto the Flippin Awesome card, because if you don't, then it'll be out of order when you flip. So and here I'm moving my house just a little closer to the center of the panel, and I just kind of eyeballed where that tree would be, how far away it was in the first panel, and I made a mark just so I knew where to glue it down. I did the cutting and trimming with each panel, moving my trick-or-treaters and the house even closer together to where the fourth panel there, that little ghostie is at the door, ready to trick-or-treat. So now that those are all finished, I'm going to cut out the Flippin Awesome card. For those panels that I used for the trick-or-treaters in the house, I just used 110-pound cardstock, and this is black licorice cardstock from My Favorite Things. It's nice and thick. I have the Gemini Junior, which is what I use for most of my die cutting, and it's not quite big enough for this Flippin Awesome. You can see it hangs off there, so you have to kind of die cut one side and then move it over and then die cut the rest. So, and not too big of a deal. Now, one of these days I'd love to get that bigger Spellbinders comes out, has a very large die cut machine. I forget the dimensions on it, but it would fit these large dies just with one pass. So maybe that'll go on my Christmas list. So once I've cut this off, it has score lines where you're going to put each of those panels, and I bent them one way and then bent them back the other way. That way they would be nice and movable. Make sure that they are easily moved in and out, and that's I was kind of testing it there. Now, the best way to place your panels on is to that left side with the pull tab. You're going to want to place it on the left with the little, I guess we'll call it feet, on the right. Now, the Flippin Awesome comes with these larger squares, so I cut those out with the same black cardstock, and now I'm gluing my little panels onto that. And what I did is, after I glued them, I just stacked them with the first panel, what I want showing first, on the bottom, and then my last panel would be on the top, because that's the one I want to glue on first. So once those are all glued, I'm going to start gluing them to the card. I want to make sure I get the correct direction, because those feet hug that piece that pulls out. And I apologize, it's really hard to see. In hindsight, I would show it a little differently, but maybe next time. Now I'm gluing these down, and I only show the first one here. I'll have another video out soon with a Christmas scene showing the Flippin Awesome, so I will show a little bit more about how to put that together. But as you can see, my trick-or-treaters on that first panel, you know, where they're far away, and then as you flip through it, they're going to get closer and closer. And this panel is going to be is what the Flippin Awesome maker is going to go on. And this is how I blended those little panels that the trick-or-treaters are on. I masked off the bottom and then just ink blended the Distress Oxide ink on the top, the black soot, and then I'm going to line it up on the bottom, make sure it's all nice and lined up, and overlapped it just a smidge. And then I'm going to use that same walnut stain Distress Oxide with my foam blenders on the bottom. And I only have 4 of these blender brushes, and I just keep my little foam pads taped underneath my ink pad. And then I just swap them out when I need them. So I'm going to wipe that off. And this one I did spray with the same Sukoneko spray that I did with the little panels. I didn't show that though. I'm going to stamp and color and die cut a few more pieces that I can use on the card, because I'm going to make a SlimLine card with it, and that Flippin Awesome doesn't take up the whole part of the card, so I have to fill it out with some other things. So I put the rest of the houses down, and I put some other another moon and some more clouds, and then I realized later I didn't need the moon and the clouds because of that first panel. You'll see already has the moon and clouds, and because, like I said, it's the distance objects are going to stay in the same spot, so I don't need to have a second one. But you'll see that here in a minute when I start putting the card together. And I stamped extra trees. I didn't use some of these, but I'll just save them for next time. I cut down a piece of 110 pound Neenah Solar White cardstock to measure. The finished card measures, I believe, 4 by 9. So I cut that down to 8 by 9 and then scored it and folded it. I glued on the, I used the My Favorite Things black and white stripes paper pad, and I kind of had to be a little creative with those lines to get them to match up, because the papers are 6 by 6. They don't quite fit, so you kind of have to fudge them a little bit. And I actually learned that from Amy Rice Abbey. She is a master at trying to get smaller pages to fit on SlimLine cards. And that purple cardstock in the back is just a piece of paper that I've had in my stash forever. I used the Pink Fresh Slim Stitched rectangle to cut out that frame, that larger one, and I used the smaller die in that set to cut out that panel that was inked. So now you can see I have my houses glued down, and then I pulled out my Flippin Awesome card there, and you could put a gift card in this spot, or I'm going to put the sentiment here. And I wanted the ground to match up when you pulled it out, so it would all be even. So that's where that line is that I drew onto that piece of paper. So that way I could mask it off the same as I did the background and the panels. And I'm just cutting down some masking paper now, so it would be nice and straight. Because not only am I going to mask the bottom there, I'm also going to mask off the sides, because I want that border. And this is the same process that I did for the little squares, the little panels, the 4 little panels. I did the same exact thing. I masked off the sides where the stitching is, so that way I would have that nice white border. And then I masked off the bottom, the ground. So I'm going to ink up this spot here. I used my bone folder just to make sure it was nice and stuck so it wouldn't bleed under. If you do have any bleeding over into that border when you do take off your masks, you could use a little white gel pen to clean it up, and no one will ever notice. So I'm going to use the same black soot. I'm just inking that here. Get nice good coverage. These oxides are awesome. They blend so well. I have the distress inks, but I don't use them as often as I do these oxide inks because they just blend so easily. And they react with water or with any liquid that you put on them. So it's like a 2-for-1 there. I'm going to do the same, mask off the bottom portion, the ground that I'm going to color with the walnut stain, and then I have to put the mask down on the stitched edge to maintain that border. And I used the same masking paper. I just flipped it over so that I wouldn't carry a lot of that black ink into it, but I didn't mind if I got a little bit of black ink because it just gives the brown. And actually there I kind of added it, dabbed a little bit on the side and then rubbed it in because it kind of gives a little more of an aged, dirty look to the ground. So after that, I'm going to peel off my mask, and then I'm going to spritz this again with the Sukaneko spray and then set it aside to dry before I put my sentiments on. So I love taking that mask off, and you see the nice border around that piece. And here I am spritzing it with my spray. Once that's dried, I put the sentiment from the Stame Spooky Village stamp set from Fawn. I went ahead and inked that down with my VersaMark and then used white embossing powder. I had to cut apart my stamp to get it to fit on there, but I don't mind doing that because you can always stick it back together. And I ended up also putting that day, because it says have a spooktacular day. I put that kind of at an angle there just for a little something different. Once that's heat embossed, I took my white gel pen and then I put little eyeballs in the O's and a little mouth and a little eyebrows just to add something a little fun. So now I'm adhering the Flippin Awesome card to the base. Put a little adhesive on those feet there. And that's all the adhesive you need on that Flippin Awesome. And you're just going to press it down onto the card. Now with this card also, now right here is where I noticed I made a mistake. That greenhouse, because I wanted some dimension, some more dimension on the card. The Flippin Awesome card is pretty dimensional in itself, but I put that house up on foam, so when I tried to open and close it, it got stuck on it. So I had to take the foam off and lay it down flat. Not a big deal. On the inside, I stamped another house, and then I added pull from the My Favorite Things interactive labels. So thanks so much for stopping by. Hope you enjoyed this card tutorial. I'll see you next time.